Have you ever noticed it's always the same story? You want to talk to that person, but you don't. You want to start that project, but you delay it. You want to make that decision, but you freeze. Then you turn that hesitation into self-blame, calling yourself weak, indecisive, or even a coward. But what if I told you that none of that is true? What if the real problem isn't you, but something that's been quietly controlling you all along, without you even realizing it? In 1645, Miyamoto Musashi finished writing the Book of 5 Rings while living in a cave. By that time, he had fought over 60 duels to the death and had never lost. If you follow this channel, you already know that Musashi didn't win because he was the strongest. He won because he understood something about fear that 99% of people never do. He discovered that fear isn't your enemy. Fear is a prison, and most people are sitting inside it, thinking the bars are part of who they are. Today, you'll learn exactly how Musashi broke that prison, and more importantly, how you can begin to do the same, starting right now. But I need to warn you, this path isn't easy. It will force you to confront parts of yourself you've probably avoided your whole life. Before we continue, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And tell me in the comments, what decision is fear currently stopping you from making? When you put fear into words, you take away part of its power. Thank you for your attention. Now, let's get back to the story. Chapter 1. The Discovery. The story I'm about to tell you happened to a man named Lucas. Not the same Lucas from the last video, a different one. A 32-year-old businessman, intelligent, charismatic, but quietly falling apart inside. Every time Lucas had to make an important decision, he froze. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't lack of logic or motivation. It was something much deeper, a tightening in his chest that paralyzed him completely. When he needed to hire a new employee, he delayed. When he needed to end a relationship that was clearly toxic, he postponed it. When he needed to make a hard phone call, he told himself, "I'll do it tomorrow." Always tomorrow. And the worst part? He knew exactly what needed to be done. The right choice was obvious, but between knowing and doing stretched a chasm he couldn't cross. Lucas believed he was weak. He looked at others who made tough choices and thought, "Why can't I be like them? What's wrong with me?" Then one day, he read a quote from Musashi that shattered his illusion. "There is no fear of the unknown, only fear of losing what is familiar." That line hit him like lightning, because suddenly Lucas understood. He wasn't afraid of what might happen. He was afraid of letting go of what he already had. Even if what he had was painful, draining, or toxic. The known, even when destructive, still felt safer than the unknown. Chapter 2. The Cycle. Musashi discovered that most people live trapped inside what he called Shin no Omi, the path of the hesitant mind. And this path operates in a perfect, endless loop that keeps you stuck, no matter how much you want to change. It works like this. First, you feel an impulse. You want to act, to change, to decide. The impulse is pure, clear, almost electric. Second, fear appears. Not the obvious kind, like fear of death or pain. It's subtle, a quiet whisper. What if it goes wrong? What if I regret this? What if people judge me? Third, you negotiate with yourself. I'll wait for the right moment. I just need to prepare more. I'll think about it tomorrow. It sounds reasonable, But it's not logic. It's fear disguised as wisdom, buying time. Fourth, you postpone. And the instant you delay, a strange relief washes over you. The tension fades. The anxiety disappears. Your brain interprets that relief as success. I avoided danger. It even rewards you with dopamine, the chemical of safety. Fifth, comes guilt. A few hours later, or maybe the next day, you look back and think, why didn't I do it? I'm so weak that guilt eats away at you, but not enough to make you act. And that's the trap. Guilt doesn't end the cycle. It feeds it. Now you're carrying emotional weight that makes the next decision even harder. Sixth, the cycle restarts. Next time you have to act, you're already dragging the guilt of your last hesitation. The fear now has two layers: fear of the unknown and fear of failing again. Lucas lived in this cycle for years. Every time he delayed a decision, the loop tightened. Every time he blamed himself, the hesitation grew stronger. Until he finally realized what Musashi meant. You don't break the cycle by fighting fear. You break it by changing your relationship with fear itself. But to do that, you first have to understand why this cycle feels so powerful. The answer lies inside your own brain. Your primitive brain, the ancient part that evolved millions of years ago to keep humans alive, doesn't understand the difference between a lion and a difficult conversation. For it, emotional discomfort is the same as danger. And your primitive brain has only one mission: keep you alive. Not happy, not fulfilled, just alive. And the best way it knows to do that? Stay inside the familiar zone. Because the familiar hasn't killed you yet. So every time you try something new, step out of your comfort zone, or take a risk, your brain rings the alarm. Danger. Unknown. Stay still. The problem is, your brain evolved to survive in a world where danger was physical. Lions, snakes, rival tribes. In that world, hesitation could save your life. But in this world, it's destroying your potential. Not making that call won't kill you today, but it might kill your dream in 6 months. Not ending that toxic relationship won't stop your heart, but it will slowly drain your spirit for years. Your brain is running prehistoric software on modern problems. That's why you feel paralyzed. A Stanford neuroscientist who has studied fear for over 18 years found something remarkable. The human brain doesn't distinguish between real and imagined threats. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, fires the same way whether you're being chased by a predator or giving a presentation. To your ancient brain, embarrassment equals death. And that's what Lucas finally discovered. He wasn't broken. He wasn't weak. He was normal. His brain was simply doing what it was designed to do. Protect him from the unknown. But Musashi knew that understanding the problem isn't enough. You need a method to escape it. And that path begins with a concept he called Mushin, the mind without mind. Don't be fooled by the poetic name. It's not abstract philosophy. It's a mental combat technique that could save your life. Chapter 3. Mushin. The mindless mind. Imagine standing in a duel to the death, swords drawn, your opponent's eyes locked on yours. One wrong move and you're gone. In that moment, what kills you isn't your opponent's blade, it's your own mind. Because the moment you think, should I attack now? What if he counters? What if I miss? You're already dead. Hesitation kills faster than steel. Musashi fought his first duel at the age of 13. He faced an experienced adult samurai, and won. How? Because he didn't hesitate. While his opponent calculated, Musashi acted. Over the next 60 duels, the same pattern repeated. His opponents were masters. They knew every stance, every strike, every counter. But when it came to the moment of truth, they hesitated. And in that fraction of a second, that half-breath of doubt, Musashi struck and won. He realized something profound. The mind that overthinks is the mind that loses. In the heat of action, you must be completely present, empty of thought, free of fear, untouched by hesitation. This is Mushin, the mind that clings to nothing. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't calculate. It simply moves. But don't misunderstand. This isn't about being reckless or impulsive. It's not emotional reaction. It's conscious action before fear takes the stage. If you already know what needs to be done, just do it. Here's the truth no one tells you. Mushin isn't achieved by meditating in a cave for 20 years. It's something you train, and Musashi trained it every single day. Lucas decided to apply the same principle in his own life. He listed 3 major decisions he'd been avoiding for months. 3 choices he knew were necessary, but fear had paralyzed him every time. Fire an employee who wasn't performing, but happened to be his friend. End a relationship that was draining him emotionally. Call an investor to pitch an idea that could change everything, or lead to public rejection. Here's what he did differently. He didn't try to erase fear. He didn't repeat positive affirmations. He didn't wait to feel ready. He used what Musashi called Ken no Sen, taking initiative before the mind interferes. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Before checking email, before coffee, before thinking. He picked up the phone. "Hey, we need to talk at 10. That was it. No hesitation, no second guessing. Within seconds of hanging up, fear struck. What did you just do? You're not prepared. You could have waited. But something was different this time. The action was already taken. Fear had arrived too late. And a delayed fear is a powerless fear. At 10 a.m., the meeting happened. Was it uncomfortable? Absolutely. Was it easy? Not even close. But it was done. And when it ended, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in years. Power. Not power over others, but the power of movement. The power of action taken despite fear. Tuesday. Decision 2. The relationship. This one was harder. It carried history, emotion, guilt. His mind began its familiar routine. Wait another week. Maybe it'll get better. Don't be so cold. But Lucas recognized that voice now, the voice of negotiation. And negotiation is just fear wearing a mask of logic. That evening at 7 p.m., he walked into the house, sat down, and said calmly, "We need to talk about us." No planning, no scripts, no escape routes. The conversation was painful. There were tears. There was anger. Moments where he almost gave in. But he didn't. Because he had finally understood Musashi's most important lesson. The pain of action is sharp but temporary. The pain of inaction is dull and lasts forever. Wednesday. The 3rd decision. The investor call. This was the hardest one yet. Failure here meant humiliation. A no that everyone might hear. As the phone rang, panic returned. What if he laughs? What if he thinks I'm ridiculous? What if I fail in front of everyone? But Lucas breathed deeply and whispered the mantra Musashi once wrote. The only difference between the living samurai and the dead samurai is that one acted, and the other hesitated. The call connected. Lucas made his request directly. No excuses, no over-explaining, no begging. The answer? Number. Rejection stung. It burned for 30 minutes. Then it was gone. What remained was something far more powerful than approval. The unshakable realization that he could survive rejection. And that realization, that inner stability, was the moment Lucas finally understood what Mushin really means. Chapter 4. The Principle of Familiarization. Musashi wrote something in the Book of Five Rings that confuses almost everyone the first time they read it. Become familiar with death every day. People assume it's morbid, depressing, or nihilistic. But it's none of those things. It's one of the most practical and powerful techniques ever discovered for breaking the cycle of fear. Here's why it works. Your brain fears the unknown, because to your primitive mind, the unknown means potential danger. But the moment something stops being unknown, it stops being frightening. Musashi meditated on his own death every single day. Not because he wanted to die, but because he wanted to remove death's power as a deciding factor. If you've already accepted that death is inevitable, then death can't control your choices anymore. And this principle applies to every fear. Fear of rejection. Familiarize yourself with rejection. Fear of failure. Familiarize yourself with failure. Fear of embarrassment. Familiarize yourself with embarrassment. How? By deliberately exposing yourself to the things that make you uncomfortable, not to suffer, but to teach your nervous system that they won't destroy you. A Harvard neuroplasticity researcher who has studied therapeutic exposure for over 14 years explains it this way. When you repeatedly face a fearful situation without catastrophic consequences, your amygdala learns that it isn't dangerous. After around 10 to 15 exposures, the fear response can drop by up to 70%. You're not removing fear. You're retraining your brain not to react to it. Lucas decided to test this. He created a 30-day experiment. Every day, he would do one thing that made him uncomfortable. Not huge leaps, just small, intentional steps. Day 1. He asked for a discount on his morning coffee, something he never did, afraid it would make him look cheap. Day 2. He started a random conversation with a stranger in an elevator, something he always avoided because small talk made him anxious. Day 3. He posted a controversial opinion online, something he'd always held back out of fear of being judged. Each day, a new act of mild discomfort, and each day the same result. He survived. More than that, he realized something profound. The fear before the action was always 10 times worse than the action itself. The barista said no to the discount. So what? The stranger gave a short reply. So what? A few followers criticized his post. So what? Nothing catastrophic happened. And as the days went by, his brain began to understand. Discomfort is not danger. By day 15, something had changed. The tightness in his chest before facing discomfort was fading. The sensation was still there, but weaker, distant, manageable. By day 30, He did something he never imagined possible at the start of the month. He stood on a stage in front of 200 people and gave a talk about his field. No slides, no script. Just him, a microphone, and his commitment not to hesitate. Was it perfect? Number. He stumbled a few times, forgot a few lines, but he finished. And the moment he stepped off that stage, he knew. He wasn't the same man who had stepped onto it. Chapter 5. Heijoshin, the everyday mind. Here's the hidden problem. You can train yourself to face specific moments of fear. The big ones, the confrontations, the pressure points. But what about the quiet kind? The constant background fear that never fully leaves you, whispering that you're not good enough, that something will go wrong, that you should stay small, stay safe. Musashi had an answer for that. 2. And it's one of the most counterintuitive yet powerful techniques he ever taught. He called it Heijoshin, the everyday mind. The idea sounds simple, but it's devastating in its power. You must keep the same mental state no matter what you're doing. No spikes in emotion, no dramatic highs and lows, just a steady, calm line of awareness. Why? Because if you save your special mindset only for moments of stress, you're training your brain to panic when stress arrives. You're teaching yourself, this is different, this is dangerous. Go into survival mode. But if you treat a duel with the same composure as drinking tea, your brain doesn't trigger alarms. It thinks, it's just another moment. No drama. Lucas decided to test this principle. He stopped doing what almost everyone does before high-stakes moments. The mental psych-up routine. The "this is important, don't mess this up, focus" kind of talk that people believe helps them prepare. But that kind of self-talk does the opposite. It tells your brain, this is dangerous. So Lucas flipped it completely. Before big meetings, presentations, and difficult conversations, he did nothing special. No pep talks, no rituals. He simply showed up as if it were an ordinary day. He walked into meetings with the same mental tone he had while brushing his teeth or grabbing lunch. At first it felt strange, even irresponsible. How can you approach a multi-million-dollar meeting with the same attitude as ordering coffee? But what happened next shocked him. Without the mental preparation ritual, he entered those meetings calmer, clearer, and more adaptable. His reactions were fluid. His presence was steady. He wasn't preloaded with anxiety before the meeting even began. By removing the layer of anticipatory tension, he finally allowed his mind to move freely. 3 months after applying Musashi's principles, Lucas was unrecognizable, not because he had become emotionless, but because he had broken the cycle. He still felt fear. Of course he did. But fear no longer controlled him. He learned to act through fear instead of waiting for it to disappear first. And here's the part no one tells you. When you finally break the fear cycle, people around you won't always celebrate you. They'll feel uncomfortable. They'll call you cold, impulsive, or detached. Why? Because your courage highlights their hesitation. Your movement reminds them of their paralysis, and that makes them uneasy. One friend even told him, "Man, you've changed. You're colder now, less human." Lucas smiled and replied quietly, "No, I'm not colder. I'm just less stuck. There's a difference." Chapter 6. The death of the old version. But it all comes with a cost, and Musashi was brutally honest about that cost. You can't break the cycle of fear without destroying a part of yourself. The part that craves approval. The part that avoids discomfort. The part that waits for guarantees before acting. That version of you can't survive the process. And death, even symbolic death, always hurts. Because it means saying goodbye to an identity you've worn for years. The identity of the caring person. The identity of the sensitive one. The identity of the person who always thinks before acting. They sound like virtues, and sometimes they are. But more often, they're just elegant masks for cowardice. Lucas realized this the day he ended his relationship. The person looked at him and said, "You used to be so careful with my feelings. What happened?" And Lucas replied quietly, "I stopped using your feelings as an excuse to avoid my own." Was that cruel? Maybe. But it was true. He had spent years using care for others as an excuse to avoid making painful but necessary choices. And in doing so, he had been cruel. Not to them, but to himself. A behavioral psychologist at Yale University, who has studied identity transformation for over 2 decades, found something remarkable. When you change deep-seated behavioral patterns, your brain experiences a kind of mourning. You are grieving the old version of yourself, and the brain interprets that grief as a real loss. That's why genuine transformation always comes with emotional turbulence. You're not just learning new behaviors, you're killing old ones. And those old patterns were tied to who you believed you were. Musashi lived this literally. After decades as a wandering samurai, undefeated in more than 60 duels, he stopped fighting. Not because of fear, but because he realized he had nothing left to prove. He retreated into the mountains, lived in caves, painted, wrote, and sculpted. Those who once admired him thought he'd lost his mind. Japan's greatest swordsman, now living as a hermit. But Musashi had understood something profound. You must be willing to let go, even of the identity of victor, if it's holding you back from evolution. And that's the part most people can't handle. Because it's far easier to remain consistent with who you've always been than to become who you need to be. Lucas faced that exact moment when his business began to grow. He had always defined himself as the guy who does everything himself. But to rise higher, he had to delegate, trust others, and release control. The Lucas who did everything alone had to die, so the Lucas who could lead could be born. And yes, that was painful. That old identity had served him for years. But now, it was his prison. 6 months later, Lucas was running a company 3 times larger, managing a team of 15, and working half the hours he once did. How? Because he no longer made decisions based on fear. He no longer avoided hard conversations. He no longer postponed what needed to be done. And most importantly, he stopped taking pride in putting up with things. Because pride in endurance is just another form of fear of change. Then came the realization that changed everything. Breaking the cycle of fear isn't a one-time victory. It's a daily discipline. Fear never truly disappears. It just stops commanding you. Tomorrow, it'll still whisper the same familiar lies. Wait a little longer. It's not the right time. What if it goes wrong? But now, you'll recognize those voices for what they are. Outdated survival programs trying to keep you in a comfortable cage. And when that moment comes, you'll have a choice you never had before. Listen and obey. Or listen and act anyway. Chapter 7. The Way of the Modern Warrior. Musashi died at the age of 62, alone in a cave, writing his final words. He didn't die in a glorious duel, surrounded by applause or legend. He died quietly, at peace, having completely transcended the need to prove anything. His last written words were simple: "I regret nothing." Just 3 words, but within them lived the essence of an entire lifetime spent refusing to surrender to fear. Now ask yourself, could you die without regret? Could you look back without seeing a list of things you didn't do because you were afraid? Conversations you avoided, risks you postponed, versions of yourself you never allowed to exist. Most people die full of regret, not because they failed, but because they never truly tried. Because fear kept them safe, small and silent. And here's the brutal truth no one wants to face. Safety is an illusion. You think you're protected inside your comfort zone. But in reality, you're just delaying the inevitable discomfort that life will eventually bring. You'll have to face those hard conversations one day, either because you chose to have them when it mattered, or because life forced them on you when it was too late. You'll face change eventually, either because you initiated it, or because it swept over you before you were ready. And you'll confront your fears, either consciously, on your terms, or unconsciously, when they've already shaped years of your life. Musashi understood this truth centuries ago. The fear you avoid today doesn't disappear. It grows, it accumulates, it compounds, until one day you look back and realize you've spent your entire life serving an invisible master. Lucas may not be real, but you know him. Because Lucas is you. He's me. He's everyone who's ever felt that tightness in their chest before doing something that mattered. The difference isn't that some people feel no fear. It's that they act anyway. So here's the choice, the same one you'll face tomorrow morning and the next day and the next. Will you obey that inner voice that says, "Wait a little longer"? It's not the right time, or will you recognize it for what it is, an outdated survival mechanism, and act anyway? Because here's the truth, you're not weak. You never were. You're simply trapped in a cycle Musashi identified 400 years ago. A cycle that keeps you safe, but small, comfortable, but imprisoned, alive, but not living. And the way out isn't waiting for fear to vanish. It's moving through it, right now. In that decision you've delayed, in that conversation you've avoided, in that change you already know you need to make. Musashi fought over 60 duels and never lost. Not because he was fearless, but because he understood the real enemy wasn't the sword. It was hesitation. You're not dueling with other warriors. You're dueling with your own life. And every day you hesitate, you lose a little more ground. The question isn't, are you afraid? The question is, will you let fear decide for you? If this video helped shift your perspective on fear, subscribe to Discipline Dojo and share in the comments. Which fear will you confront first? If you've watched this far, thank you for your attention and for your courage to face your truth. Until the next video.